Hello, everyone. Comtek. Clients ask for them by name, and they're undoubtedly the industry standard when it comes to producer, director, and client monitoring. So Comtek recently did a change or offered a change in antennas with the M216 Option 7 transmitters, which could also work with the other transmitters as well, with this brand new base-loaded whip. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and let's go ahead and get right into it. The key to a great sounding lob is 10% placement and 90% process.
Typically, I'll do a script breakdown on my iPad. Ingenuity and flexibility really are the keys here because we have the same goal, capturing the performance.
It is this process here that inspired us to create Wire Like the Pros, a masterclass for students and professionals who have the desire to excel and go beyond just the wiring technique and tools.
Let's talk about working with the actors.
So I invite you to come over now and enroll into Wire Like the Pros at mwsound.net. So recently I had the opportunity to speak to the designer of this brand new antenna from Comtek. The gentleman's name is Zoltan Shah, CSEH, and basically they did a redesign of the helical whip here that you'll find with the 216 Option 7 transmitter to a base-loaded whip like you see here with the red tip. And I'm going to talk a little bit through that. I had some conversations with the antenna designer to really wrap my head around, well, what went into the change, why the redesign, and what are the benefits? So that's what we're going to talk about today. But the first thing I want to do is just kind of overview what this transmitter is, specifically from more of a technical standpoint. For those of you who have been doing this for a while know that the Comtek transmitter here, which is the M216 Option 7 transmitter, is commonly found in sound bags. And this is something that is used by clients and producers to listen and monitor. So the intelligibility, the quality of the sound, and also what we're really going to talk about today is the transmission robustness and integrity is absolutely critical. So recently, I actually picked up another one of these. I actually have two of them here, and went with the model here that has the base-loaded whip. And the model number on that specific is the SLW-216B. And you'll notice here by the red tip that it is the base-loaded model. And this is the SL216W. Now, I believe if you buy one of these brand new, it may still come with the helical antenna, but you should contact Comtek or one of the dealers to find out which one is which here. I believe when I bought a second one of these transmitters, I actually did have to separately buy this antenna. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this antenna and what the benefits are, and talk about this thing that you may have saw in the thumbnail about, is your antenna microphonic, and what that means. So right out of the gate, before we start getting into some of the technicalities of it, a microphonic component in any electrical system means that when the conductor, which would be the helical whip here on this antenna, and when it is contacted, can basically transfer noise out the output of the transmitter. So sometimes when these things are floating around in a bag or something like that, or maybe you're wandering around, as things get hit, it might start to transfer into the audio of the Comtek receivers. So that's what went into the redesign of this. So let's talk about, first and foremost, what this transmitter outputs power-wise, just in case you didn't know, and also what the bandwidth of it. So this is a VHF transmitter, first and foremost. and it's on the 216 megahertz frequency. And all of the coordinated frequencies for this particular one are in 1 megahertz. So they basically start around the 216 range and go close up to 217. So this particular antenna, and I know if you guys have seen it, actually has a circular, and it's actually made out of a very rigid steel. And we'll talk about some of the differences in the conductor and the other antenna versus this, wound in a tight coil. And when you have a element or conductor element wound in a coil like this, it basically creates something called inductance. So in an antenna system, you have both inductance and you have capacitance. And the idea is that the amount of inductance will actually shorten or lengthen the resonance of the antenna. So this base-loaded antenna, which is a quarter wavelength, has a coiled conductor in it, which makes it inductive because it's electrically short. And what this inductance does is it basically emulates a fully quarter wave or half wavelength necessary for resonance for this antenna. So when you see that it has a helical design, that is what it's for. And so it's an electrically shortened antenna. It's a helical whip that's electrically shortened to allow it to be resonant on the 216 megahertz band. So let's go down here, and I'm going to plug in this to, we have a spectrum analyzer here. And an important note, this here is a 20 dB pad. So in the settings here of this, I basically have a setting of the level reduced external minus 20. It might be hard to see there, but I'm basically compensating for the 20 dB pad here. And the reason why we always want to put in line a pad when we're measuring a transmitter is because the input of the spectrum analyzer is only rated to receive so much before it could overload the front end. So it's just something to know about before you plug in a transmitter to your spectrum analyzer. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in this transmitter here and power it up so we can see first and foremost what we're transmitting. So this is the 216, the M216 option 7 transmitter, which is rated, the power output level is at 10 milliwatts. So if I go here, we'll see that our marker here is reading 12.4 dBm. Now 10 milliwatts just happens to equal 10 dBm on the logarithmic scale. So the fact that we're somewhere around 12 here tells me that this thing is working great. We're actually getting a little bit more power at it than what it's rated for. And then the other thing you might see here, which is interesting, since this is a frequency or FM modulated transmitter, is the deviation or the bandwidth without it being deviated here. Because deviation is when the audio inputs into the transmitter, and basically frequency modulation causes it to widen the bandwidth because it's physically moving the frequency is how it's modulating a transmitter and you're hearing the audio. But this one here is, it's hard to see, but you'll see here that it's actually, these are 100 kilohertz blocks. So this one, without being modulated right now, is about 50 kilohertz wide, which is very, very narrow. And also another really strong benefit of using the VHF in comparative, say, the UHF transmitters for transmission is that the VHF is a pretty clean band, meaning that there's a lot less going on there in 216 than what you would find in, say, UHF with TV frequencies and so forth. So it makes it very, very efficient. So now that we know the power output of this transmitter and what it looks like on a spectrum analyzer, let's talk about the microphonic nature. So what do we mean when we mean microphonic? Well, I briefly talked about microphonic is basically when acoustical energy is transferred into an electrical circuit. So after talking to the antenna designer at Comtek, Zoltan let me know because the helical conductive element is wound evenly here all the way up to the top, and you can actually feel like the ribs on here of the element underneath the coating here, that it tends to be more microphonic, meaning that any acoustical pressure or any sort of bump or anything is possibly going to transfer into the output. So what they did on the redesign of the antenna is that, let me take this clip off because you never want to try to remove these antennas like this with the clip on because it can put pressure on the connector. So what they did is they went with a base-loaded design. So this antenna, which is the make sure I say it right, the SLW-216B is base-loaded. So it still has the inductance necessary to electrically lengthen the element so it can be resonant at 216 megahertz. But the difference is that inductance is limited to the bottom of the antenna. So it basically starts here, and then the conductor coming up underneath here is a straight conductor. And as a result, most of anything that would be microphonic or cause transfer noise would be in the inductive element. So what that means is that there's either more voltage or current in the inductive part of the antenna than there is in the straight resonant part, because all antennas have minimum and maximum current or voltage depending upon where the input of the antenna is. And we could write a whole book on antenna design, so that's not what we're doing today. But basically, by doing a base-loaded version of the antenna, it helps eliminate the microphonic nature when it gets contacted in the back. So some things to know, though, however, that I learned from them is that they said you might need to update your transmitter if your transmitter is, say, older than, say, 2023. Because not that the antenna would not work, because an antenna is an antenna. It's just that they continue to improve the things inside of the transmitter to help it be more robust, less prone to interference, and so forth. So contact them. They're very, very good about giving you the technical information and the know-how. You can give them the serial numbers and they can tell you your options. So this particular antenna also, I said, has some differences. So this uses a stainless steel element on the helical wound conductor here. This one uses copper. So copper, according to Comtek and what they talked about, is a superior conductor in relationship to these two. So that's just something to note. It doesn't mean that this antenna is going to go longer or be better with interference if you're getting interference. What it does mean is it's going to have less transfer noise. And that means is if you're in the bag or if this thing's moving around or clanking like sometimes it might do, that you will have less problems with the system. So so that's the deal with these two antennas. And I've had an opportunity to kind of work with them a little bit and try them out, and they both work great. I did notice, however, that I was getting less problems with the base-loaded whip in the bag as far as like any sort of interference or something of that nature. The other thing, I don't have one of the cables here I wanted to mention, is that be very careful to make sure that you're also using the cables with you'll see, gosh, I wish I had one right in front of me, but they actually have a ferrite bead or a little bump in the cable for your input into the transmitter. And what that is that's a common mode choke. So what that does is basically current will run down the line feeding the audio input, feeding the transmitter, and can create distortion or problems or RFI interference in the transmitter on its output. So that's just something to keep in mind, because sometimes you might think, well, I'm having a problem with my antenna, but it could just be that you're using the wrong kind of cable and so forth. So when it comes to Comtex and it comes to what the clients listen to, it's very, very important that I'm keeping in mind what kind of transmitter I'm using, how I have it set, what kind of antenna I'm using. Does the cable have a ferrite bead to reject common mode current? There's a lot that can happen in FM wireless to think about when using these systems. So I think for me, this is just going to be a little short stream. It's something that I was wanting to talk about today and give you guys the opportunity here to put your comments and say hello. And a couple other notes is that there's also the base station 75, which you can certainly use this antenna with as well. I'd imagine that you're not going to have as much problem with microphonic or contact noise using a base station 75. But if you're like me, you might actually keep one of those things in your sound bag because I typically keep those, my base station 75 mounted upside down in a sound bag. So there could be, reason to have that kind of thing. And so I'm just going to take a moment here and answer some of the questions and say hello to everyone. Thank you for being here today. And Alan, always great to see you. It's been a good antenna for me so far, Alan. I think the important thing was really picking up the phone, talking to Comtek, talking with the designer and saying, hey, what is this thing good for? What's the idea behind this other option? Because it's something I just really didn't know until I had a conversation with him. Greeting from Bulgaria. Hey, Zeno, thanks so much for, or Kino. Thank you for saying hello, and I like the picture of that sound bag on the front. I think that's you got a 633 there with some Electrosonics digital hybrid, a very robust system right there. Alan says, should the transmitter be sent to Comtek so they can tune the output stage to the antenna? They did that with my original antenna, and it made a big improvement. Yeah, that's a great point, Alan. When I spoke to Zoltan, they said that it's good if your Comtek and transmitter is, say, older than, say, 3 years old, or if you notice any sort of like problems as far as like frequency is concerned, especially if you're using a base station 75 or something like that, they do get serviced. And another thing that I learned from them is that they're also upgrading components as well when they do bring them in for service, such as the base station 75 received a larger capacitor, which helps with low-end frequency from what I understand. And also these transmitters here, they actually do some work inside of the transmitters as well to help just, the whole idea obviously is so this thing can do its job the best that it's able to do without having interference or other types of problems. So that's a great comment. Thank you, Alan. And then is the ceiling fan reflecting in that RF scanner? Yes, it is. That's exactly what it's doing. I got a fan above here. Yeah, thanks so much. And and answer my question about sending the transmitter. Yeah. Well, Alan, it's great to see you here. And thank you, everyone, for all of the comments and being here. I'm going to make this a quick one, unless anyone has any other questions about antennas and these two particular antennas. Let me know here. A couple other notes I'll mention about. There's one thing in particular. Oh, I'm so glad we didn't stop. See, we're not done. We're never done. It just keeps opening up. You can use this antenna with the Mini-Mite with an adapter. That's a really common question I have, and I think I have that adapter. Let me look. No, I don't. I don't have it handy, but it's the adapter. I know the name of the connectors is a PL259 to BNC female. I had to look at it, make sure I was telling you the right thing. So PL259 to BNC female allows you to use an antenna like this with a Mini-Mite, because I have one of those like that on my cart just because it works, number one. Number two, it's basically, I don't like to have the big whip moving around. Sometimes I just feel like it could be, someone could get their eye poked out or something. But keep in mind that the M216 whip is a half wavelength conductor, and this one is electrically short, with inductance, so it's not as efficient antenna. But that base station 75 puts out 120 milliwatts, which is over 10 times the power of one of these. So, you know, a little bit of loss of efficiency on the antenna is not going to be the end of the world. Well, anyway, I think that wraps me up, everyone. Great to see everyone here. If you haven't, subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications tab, so that way when these new videos or live streams come up that you can actually be here in person to participate. And thanks so much, everyone. Make it a great day. Go record great sound, and we'll talk to you soon.
The key to a great sounding lob is 10% placement and 90% process.
Typically, I'll do a script breakdown on my iPad. Ingenuity and flexibility really are the keys here, because we have the same goal: capturing the performance.
It is this process here that inspired us to create Wire Like the Pros, a masterclass for students and professionals who had the desire to excel and go beyond just the wiring technique and tools.
Let's talk about working with the actors.
So I invite you to come over now and enroll into Wire Like the Pros at mwsound.net.